Good morning, fish keepers. Cam here from the fishroom.co.nz. We've done it. We've made it to Friday. It's a fantastic Friday. A, because I've got coffee. That's a good coffee. And B, we have a very special guest on. So let's bring them up. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Cam.
Good morning, Big. Good evening, Biggs. Afternoon, Biggs.
Yeah, you're a whole day ahead of us.
I certainly am.
Friday. I'm like, it's not Friday.
I know, we're stuck on Thursday.
Thank you very much for being with us. It's greatly appreciated. This has been a marathon effort of trying to get you here and making everyone's schedules work. So we got there in the end. So thank you very much.
No, I'm honored, my friend. Sorry I couldn't make it earlier.
It is what it is. Things happen. Cool. So first thing I would like to know is what got you involved in aquariums or fish tanks or where you are in your hobby today?
Well, entirely that would be due to my father. My father, I remember growing up, we always had a little fish tank, probably only a 10-gallon. I think a 20-gallon tank would be an absolute luxury back in the day. I'm 53. We always had a tank in the. My dad was a professor, and strong academia, and we had a huge library in the basement, and that's where the fish tank was. And it was the standard box filter with the charcoal and the wool, air driven. We did have a heater. I'm not that old. It's not like we had the slate tanks with the Bunsen burners or anything, but we did have the basic Tetras and the Cardinals and whatnot. And then I do remember, I got into it very, very early, but the same appreciation, not just for fish tanks, but all nature. So Dad was never really into reptiles, so I can't really say where the reptiles and the spiders and all the dangerous stuff came from, but just that general appreciation of everything natural. We owned a gardening company growing up, so we were very heavily involved. We had a massive yard, so you didn't get to sleep in on the weekend. You had to get up and do something in the yard. Doesn't matter what it was, and it's just always been entrenched in me. Me and my dad. My mom passed away about a year and a half ago, and I'm kind of my dad's primary call for everything. And we just moved him just yesterday into a different home. So me and my dad are still very, very close because of that connection.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So for those that haven't seen you on YouTube, for example, what other animals do you keep? Because I know there's quite a variety of things that you have. So just to sort of fill people in a little bit on that.
I'll give you the story as to why I have all that other stuff. Now, before I was really known for fish, I was probably known more for dangerous animals, primarily venomous snakes. I've spoken in the Netherlands, and I spoke in Germany. This is years and years ago. And then I had children. My oldest daughter is 23, and I hadn't kept anything really that I'd consider really dangerous. No, nothing life-threatening since she was born. But when I started the YouTube, we kind of talked a little bit briefly at the very beginning before we went live. And my YouTube journey was not something I ever really considered. Joey, the King of DIY, really, really was instrumental in pushing Rachel O'Leary, who's a very dear friend of mine in the States. She's not really active as much on YouTube anymore, but she was a strongly committed, very passionate aquarist, and she still is very, very much somebody I would consider family. But she was very instrumental in pushing me. And the whole goal behind it was to try and find ways and means of getting a stronger educational focus on YouTube. No disrespect to anybody else that's on YouTube, but there's millions and millions of channels out there, and a lot of them are they offer absolutely nothing. I fully know that if I wanted to get the views and the clicks and all that sort of stuff, my best video would probably be a video of me getting hit by a car or falling down the stairs or getting bit by one of my dangerous animals or something, but that's just not really my focus. So I started YouTube journey. I spent a couple of weeks with Rachel back and forth, and she taught me basically every single step of how to do it. I did that and I started, and it was kind of a weak start at the beginning, but I had much higher expectations of what I thought I needed to do. I felt like I could not just come out of the beginning and just do something junky. I had to be conscious of, there's no basket of laundry behind me or something. You know what I mean? Like everything, the lighting and all those sort of aspects, I wanted to make sure that I was doing my best. But then shortly after I started, only probably about 8 months after I started, the COVID came. And when the pandemic started, it immediately shut everything down globally for almost everybody, right? Everybody was affected by it. But being in central Canada, it had a different effect than a lot of other people in Canada. So, for example, Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. Vancouver's the far west coast. It's a massive city, multi-millions of people. Toronto is, the epicenter of the world for Canada, huge, huge city. And Montreal in Quebec is also. Those are the three major ports where anything coming from overseas starts. So it doesn't matter if you're ordering tropical fish or lizards or whatever, tropical plants, they all end up in those 2 3 places first, and then they move within the country. But when the pandemic started, as the world was trying to figure out what the hell's going on, basically in central Canada, we kind of got forgotten, and no Canadian carriers would touch anything freight originating outside of Canada. So fish dried up like that for me. And even to this day, my major wholesaler that's local to me, there's still areas of the world that have not opened up. But during the pandemic, the most he had access to was 3 cities. Belém out of Brazil, but if you're ordering from Brazil, you're pretty much getting only what we call sexy stuff. You're getting all the weird plecos, the real high-ticket items. He had access to Colombia, which was Bogota, which to me is a lot of bread and butter stuff. And then he had access to one of the cities, and I can't remember, I think it was Miami in Florida. And basically that is southern Florida. So that's all the farms where the southern peninsula of Florida is all liquid rock. The water's super, super hard, and it's basically filtered through coral. And that's all your African cichlid breeders. Well, none of those areas really were passionate to me for the focus of my study. And I call my fish keeping as my study because I'm always working forward to my next goal. And I was really at a crossroads. I didn't know what to do. I was like, I've just gotten this thing started, and now the brakes have been put on, no fault of mine. And if any of you have ever watched it's still on there because I haven't had time to change it. I have a little intro clip on my main channel. There's 3 channels now, and I'll get at that in a second. But the main channel, the Mad Aquarist, has this little intro video, and it kind of tells the story of what I plan to do with my channel. And I wasn't able to do it. I wasn't able to take you behind the scenes. I wasn't able to travel. I wasn't even able to see my best friend's fish tank and talk about that. So I really had no idea what to do. And that's how everything started morphing. I figured if I'm going to keep this going, I'm going to make it more just me. And then I started embracing other aspects. And that's where the spiders came in. That's where the centipedes came in. That's where some snakes started coming in. But it all came in very organically. I'm a national natural territory manager for a pet and vet supply company. And I sell pet supplies to the equivalent of like 2.5 provinces. It's a very large space. And one of my customers at the time opened a brand new store, and we kind of knew each other, but we didn't remember from where. And, we knew each other's names, and we just started this relationship opening up the store. And it's about the 3rd visit or so. He says, I remember who you are. And he says, come with me. And we went in the back room, and he opened up this overhead steel locked door. And inside it was a treasure trove of venomous snakes. He had his personal collection in this back room of this store. And that's what really kind of started all the seeds going again. And the first thing wasn't spiders. It wasn't snakes. It wasn't anything dangerous. The first thing was actually isopods. And if anybody doesn't know what isopods are, those little pill bugs, potato bugs, roly-polies, the little things you find on the floor in your basement. I don't know if you have basements in Scotland or
we call them weed lice.
Yeah, exactly. Same sort of thing, and they're basically all over the globe, and right across the world in all temperate and tropical zones. They're not in the Arctic or anything. But this gentleman was keeping a pair of cobras, or monocled cobra. He kept one called Neil, and I made a video on Grumpy Neil. And he was keeping this enclosure bioactive. Well, being the scientist in me, I was super intrigued by this and trying to, what do you mean? Like, tell me more about this. And he basically had his entire enclosure running with isopods and springtails and mealworms and all sorts of stuff that broke down all the waste products from the snake. Ate sheds, and it broke down everything. So it became not a fully natural system. That's like saying an aquarium's a natural system. It'll never be. But he did this all that way. So he limited the amount of time he had to work in the enclosure. And when you've kept these type of dangerous animals, I'm still the same way today. When I used to work in the pet store, somebody come and say, can I hold the snake? and it'd just be like a pet store corn snake or something like that. And it's still, my brain is like, why? It gives nothing to you. There's nothing for the animal in that exchange. I just like setting up nice enclosures and enjoying them. So isopods started it. And at one point in time, my YouTube channel for isopods was like number 3. Isopods became this big thing. And as we expand our knowledge using science and learning about these systems, the forest floor, the ecology of the forest floor is no different than an aquarium. You set up an aquarium and you do all those things to achieve that kind of natural balance of the bacteria, the living system. The forest floor and everything is exactly the same way. So even in my short isopod keeping time, I've evolved from one area and I've done a complete 180-degree turn into the way that we do it. And we're all learning that way. And then isopods turned into tarantulas and turned into, like, there's stuff. I've got a rack of tubs of plants over there. My basement's a disaster because we're doing the fish room right now. There's tarantulas here everywhere. Like, it's crazy. And I've got, I'm building nobody knows this because I haven't shown it yet, but I've got a 5-foot by 6-foot cage being built in the garage for 2 very special animals that I just went and saw this past weekend in Toronto. They're going to be housed together in this thing. And I've also got some very special animals coming to me from my dear friends in Brandon, Manitoba at the Westman Reptile Gardens that are just waiting for me to pick them up. And this is taking me directly back into the danger zone again. But I'm at the age, like, I've worked with these animals a lot. I have the scars to show, to prove exactly what happens when you work with it. But I dabble in a bit of everything. So I know I've gone a long way, somewhat off topic, but I'm still within.
Within.
All those other animals, they're all still very much a part of everything here. So anything the springtails, millipedes, any of the insects that are involved in any of that forest floor type ecology. And we started adding all those videos onto the channel because I didn't know what else to do fish-wise. I did not want to become the guy that just said, I'm going to do a video today on swordtails and just be just rehash a bunch of stuff about swordtails. That's not me. Everything that I've done, and I'll be totally truthful and transparent with everybody here that's watching today, is I think the content that I've put out in the past 6 months, other than some real key videos like the videos with Adrian I just did, or some of those ones that are long-term, I think my content right now is crap compared to what I want it to be, to what I expect from myself. But until I can get a room that is finished, like the fish room's just behind here, and I've shown in videos that I'm taking everything that doesn't belong in the fish room out, and everything in the other room over there, just on the other side, like directly in behind me or in front of me, is where the 12-foot aquarium is going. And I've got stuff everywhere. So my plan is to build that this winter. I've got everything. I've got the glass. I've got the epoxy. I've got the wood. I've got everything here. It's just making the space and the time for the project. Because once you start, you want to keep going. I've done too many videos on projects that I've started that have gone nowhere beyond that. And I hate it.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah. That's part of the fun, right? It never ends, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just want to touch back a little bit. When I first found your content on YouTube, there was a complete point of difference of where you were coming from. Like you're saying, you don't want to do videos on, here's the same fact about a swordtail that everyone else has got. What you were providing was so significantly different. It made it so incredibly captivating. And I think that's where the desire to continue to watch you has come from, because it's not just that here's a swordtail, you come in orange and red. It's really digging deep into what different things are, and the way you deliver it is fantastic. So thank you for that. Just as a viewer's point of view.
Honored, my friend. Like, there's lots of people that they're big channels and they do an excellent job doing the basic stuff. And they don't just concentrate on just the basic stuff. But to me, I can't do anything unless I can tell a story behind it, something that's interesting. And to be a wildlife kind of photographer guy, and then all of a sudden now I'm doing YouTube. It's like we live in a world where if I bred a fish 25 years ago and I don't have a video of it, it didn't happen. Is the mindset today. And that drives me crazy. I'm not going to go back and do things that I've done already. I want to go forward.
Yeah.
You've got to keep it interesting for yourself as well.
Yeah.
So talking about breeding, I saw a wee video where you talk about your puzzle theory when it comes to breeding. Can you explain that?
Exactly.
Can you explain that a little bit more in depth?
Everything, like, to me, like, Cam, what do you keep fish for? What is your interest in fish keeping? If you were to narrow it down to one thing, what is it?
I've been recently asked this as well, and my answer changes every time. I think I enjoy having a wee piece of nature in a glass box, if that makes sense, trying to replicate as much as I can.
Yeah. What about you, John?
I like setting up an ecosystem and watching it evolve.
Yep. See, my interest in fish keeping until recently, like the better part of the past few years, has strictly been in the puzzle. And the puzzle to me is acquiring a new species and putting all the pieces of the puzzle together to get that species to replicate properly in captivity. And by properly, I mean to within the constraints of what it normally would. Yeah. Now, in the wild, there's species, a lot of the big cichlids, Belodrochromis from Lake Tanganyika, a lot of the big Parachromis from Central America. These big cichlids produce these large groupings of progeny because there's heavy predation on these offspring. The eggs get predated on by all the different characins and then the live bears that are in their habitats. So the parents are very, very diligent trying to protect. And then there's lots of competition around them. And then some of these species are also very, very voracious, like having bred a few piranhas. Trying to raise the fry up is very challenging because they're so predacious on each other. Puffers, the same thing. It's very challenging to get them, to give them enough space that you can get food to them, but also that to limit the amount of aggression or predation between each other. But as you evolve, so do you guys, are you members of a local aquarium society in your areas?
I'm not, but I know.
But you've heard of them, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, an aquarium society, like our local one, we have what's called a Breeders' Award program. And everything is broken down in regards to what involvement do I have to get that species to breed? So as long as we have a healthy aquarium, we'd probably all agree that a guppy, a swordtail, a platy, convex cichlid, crebensis, some of those basic ones, as long as the basic needs are met and are very easily met in a small environment, they'll breed to their capacity fairly readily, right? Now, that's a pretty easy species. Now, once you've cut your teeth on a lot of those, you'll kind of figure out what your interest is. And that's why I was kind of figuring out what you guys like. Some people really go heavy into the plant root, and some people go heavy into like cichlids and African cichlids and whatever they like. Everybody's different in what they take away from this. But to me, it's working on the pieces of puzzle. So like if you look at Lake Malawi, cichlids as an example, almost every single fish breeds exactly the same way. Every one of them. So if you were colorblind, that'd be boring. I'm not colorblind, but you know what I mean? Like there's no variability there. To me, once you've figured out one, what is the challenge in breeding the other ones? There isn't, right? There really isn't. Lake Tanganyika being, insanely older, like so much more ancient than Lake Malawi, you can see in the evolution of the species, there's so much more different in their forms and their shapes and their breeding strategies than they are Lake Malawi. Lake Malawi, generally the fish are fairly similar in shape. And this is all stuff I'm taking some of this away from that interview I just did with Adrian, but it's all stuff that I knew. With the Victoria, it's a much younger lake as well. You look at Victorian cichlids, they're even more similar. They all look the same. There are a few extremities where they have extremes with different types of dental structures or their jaw structures and stuff to capitalize on feedings in a certain type of zone or something, feeding between a crevice or something. Lake Tanganyika, though, you get every extreme. You've got open water, you got crevice spawners, you got, everything you can imagine, and every color, form, and shape imaginable. Same when you go to the New World. If you want to generalize, and I know it's going to be hard to keep me on a single topic, as you probably know.
Just fire away. It's all good.
If you look at Central American cichlids, and I don't know if your viewers really are passionate about Central American cichlids. I don't know. You probably have the same sort of restrictions as would Australia for getting a lot of these types of fish, right?
We definitely do. Yep.
Yeah, but Central American cichlids, you could generalize almost all of them into certain groupings. So like a Central American cichlids, New World cichlids, Mesoamerican cichlids, doesn't matter what you want to call them, they're all the same type of fish. But they were passionate for me for like 25 years. But you get in a Jeep and you drive to one river system, you will find what I call a water cow, which is your big Vieja types, giant herbivorous things like your Synspilus, or now called Melanurus, those big, massive things. They can handle a lot of beatings from hyperaggression of some of the other species. You will find a piscivore, a predator, like a Parachromis, a jaguar, a dovi, Friedrichstali, Lozella, any of those types. You'll find one of those. You'll also find invertebrate sifters, and some of the invertebrate sifters, there's Geophagus types, and then there's also invertebrate pickers, which would be like your Therichthes types. And the Geophagus types would be like your Cribriheros or Stratus, the ones that have the big fleshy lips that dig around in the sand looking for invertebrates. Or you look at the ones like the firemouths and stuff like that have very dainty mouths. Well, the firemouth cichlid is no real different than an Alonocara in Lake Malawi, a peacock cichlid, for the way that their structures work, the way they find food. So it's very sympathetic. These are fish that are so far removed from each other by millions of years, but they've evolved in the same line. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So you go anywhere in any river in Central America, Mexico, you're going to find open water cruise predator, ambush predator, sifter, water cows, and a few variables in between. South America, you got a lot more different types of habitats, and species have evolved a lot more differently down there. Because if you look at any of the major river systems down there, everyone thinks the cichlids rule there. They don't. The catfish rule there, because the Amazon River is basically just a giant chasm, right?
Yeah.
If we really narrow it down, and the catfish own 90% of it. All the other fish live in these peripheral little areas on the edge, or they're open water fish. And the open water fish will be in massive schools. Most of your characins, any of your big, even some of the bigger characins like the Dorados and things like that. These are big, monstrous fish. Silver dollars, piranhas. These are all the same type. They're big open water fish, and they cruise along in amongst all these things. But when darkness falls, the catfish, that's when they come out and hunt. They take these things out. So everything else lives in that little periph. And then when the waters come, when the Andes ice caps melt and all that water comes rushing down, that floods the forest. But it takes everything that was in its path with it. So you're getting all that leaf litter, you're getting all those dead insects, any dead material, organic matter, plants, leaves, everything is now flushed into the system. And that's where you're going to get a massive decrease in water chemistry. You're going to get a decrease in pH. So your hydrogen levels are going to drop. You're going to get a lot more organic matter. So that's going to be causing all sorts of other factors to your chemistry. So you want that to have that pH drop. So you're going to get the acidity. You're going to get all that tannic acid, those black water type habitats, right? You're getting a cold water influx because all this water is rushing down. It was frozen at one point. So you're getting all those things. And these are all what I call triggers. And every one of these triggers is available to us as a tool to put the pieces of that puzzle together. Lake Malawi doesn't really have any puzzle to put together. Once you've bred one, they pretty much generally, and I know I'm very, very generalizing this, they generally all breed somewhat the same way. Tanganyika is similar, but there are different strategies. As per that interview that I did with Adrian, one other factor that we really want to look into, because there's one species out of that lake that's in that interview that I talked about specifically, that I spent literally 13 years working with, altering water chemistry, trying everything, and nobody in the world has bred this fish yet. And that fascinates me to no end from the scientific side. But you're talking water chemistry is water chemistry. All our water chemistry in the northern hemisphere is calciferous, calcium-based. All the water in the lower hemisphere is generally magnesium-based, specifically in the Old Rift Lake area. So being magnesium-based, it's challenging to replicate the waters. And if something is causing these challenges that we can play with, these tools that we have available to us, we can do water changes. We can alter temperature. We can alter chemistry. We can use reverse osmosis water, rainwater. We can make black water tonic. We can throw oak leaves and all these new botanicals that are available to us to create these different effects. Or sometimes we can put them all in a combination. But Lake Tanganyika, Lake Malawi, Lake Victoria, they don't really have any of these things happen. They don't get a seasonal change to any degree. They don't have any of these natural triggers. Like South American fish generally breed seasonally, cyclic.
Yeah.
The other fish don't. So everything's got its own little puzzle. It doesn't matter. I know I'm talking just primarily just cichlids, but like killifish, characins, it doesn't matter. It's putting the pieces of the puzzle together. I'm an old dude, so like this is. Think back before the internet, where you could type in anything. Think back then, like I would literally write letters to the ministries of certain countries to try and get rain patterns, to try and get anything I could get, seasonal temperature changes, anything that I could get that would be able to put those pieces of the puzzles together. And it sounds really cool and sounds really impressive, but like, think the guys that did it before me, 50 years before me. Those are the pioneers for aquatics, like Rosario, the Quartz, and like there's so many of them, right? But these guys, the biggest tank they ever had available was like a 10, maybe a 20 gallon. It had a rock bottom. No such thing as a heater, really no such thing as a filter of any kind. Some of them didn't even have power. And these guys are the people that bred wild angelfish, wild Oscars, wild convicts, wild Jack Dempseys. There's a reason those fish have some of those names. They're all mean, horrible names because these things were mean, aggressive fish. Well, if you keep those fish in a 10-gallon tank trying to breed them, it's challenging enough. You know they're going to be aggressive.
Absolutely.
I know I've gone way off topic.
No. That was very much on topic, 100%. And I can assure you that I was very captivated the entire time. And by the look of this comment here from Brian, I can assure you he and probably the other listeners were very, very captivated as well. He said he can listen to you for ages, and I totally agree with that.
What does it mean by cover off of my recent trip? I will be putting all sorts of videos about the Africa trip. I don't know how. I don't even have a video for Saturday, and that's my 1 a week thing. Yeah. But we went shock cage diving right on the Southern Cape. Nice. We went up to Table Mountain, which is this giant mountain. But just the topography is really cool. I did not find a cobra, which was one of my goals. But the thing that's odd is all the guys that live there while I was there would send me videos. Oh, my brother caught this in his yard today. And, oh, this was filmed in my backyard yesterday. And like stuff like that was happening the whole time I was there. But there's stuff there's content between those that'll be on both the channels. So when I go back to what I mentioned, I separated the 3 channels is after COVID, and I was able to start kind of going and doing content. I was able to start traveling again and speaking at events. Then all of a sudden the world opened up again that I could kind of do something. And I started realizing, because I've never really looked at any of the numbers. I don't really care. I just don't, the channel doesn't make really any money. I get like $150, $250 a month off the channel. And to me, I just look at it as it's just free money because it's just, I'm still doing it. It's still fun. The minute it's not fun, I don't care about the money. I'll just be out, but I still very much enjoy it. But I noticed that if I did a video discussing fish breeding strategies, my numbers, or what do you call them, analytics, would be great. Everything would be great. And then I put a spider rehouse video. Or I did a live feed with Joey, the king of DIY, and he kept telling everybody to go to my channel. And the video that was live that day was pigs on our farm getting neutered in our van. So if you're a hardcore fish guy and you got this guy, the big giant YouTuber tells you, yeah, go check out his channel. It's really cool. And that's the video that's live. I haven't done much. I've separated the channels now. There's 3. So the farm channel is totally separate. And I've only probably posted 2 or 3 videos since that happened because winter time is just survival. But the bug, I call it the bug channel, but it's not really bugs. It's anything that's not fish. So South Africa, I went to the aquarium. That'll be on the fish channel. If I went and talk about some of the plants and the fauna, the flora and fauna that I found on Table Mountain, that'll be on the other channel. And the channel's called the Mad Aquarist Realm Natura, and that's where all the isopods, the spiders, zoos, anything at all that's not fish will be on there.
Cool. Just again, tracking back a smidgen from when you were talking about the puzzles, you mentioned spawning and growing up piranha. We can't get piranhas here at all, so that's kind of cool to hear. So what was the process for that, and how did that come about? Was that a decision you consciously made? I'm going to do this, and how has that process worked?
Well, the piranhas are very the piranhas are no different than a neon tetra. The only thing that is different with they are acaricin. So I've bred a couple of species of silver dollars too. You need big environments, but as long as you have healthy adults and you have both sexes, you got to condition them separately generally, and then you put them together. And when you put them together, like the piranhas can be very aggressive. So in doing this, sometimes you can lose one of the pair. But the regular ones that are the red belly one, which is the common one in the trade, they're pretty easy to breed, really. I would set up a tank with a lot of Java moss. Do you know what Java moss is? Like the moss. Or you could use synthetic Java moss, which is like they use for spawning koi, like different things like that. You know, all these fish, breeding koi is probably not much different. Breeding a tiger barb is not much different. But the piranhas will actually defend the nest, which is cool. So there are, you know, it's kind of like taking a tetra and crossing it with a cichlid. Because that's what people love about cichlids is like they'll literally go and, hey, how you? You want to get together? And then they'll form this pair, and then the pair will swim together, and then they'll kind of like, hey, you want to have some kids? Yeah, sure. Listen, and then they'll start making a house, and they'll start cleaning the rocks and everything, and then they'll lay the eggs, and then they have their very distinct parental roles during egg bearing as well as during the protection of the eggs and the fry. And they'll often have very, very distinct pattern changes and stuff. And those pattern changes might look impressive to us, but they also have signals and triggers to the offspring. They're not just for show. You know, there's a reason behind it all. But the piranhas were no real different. Like if you've ever bred a danio, a zebra danio, or a tetra or anything like that, think of that same way. They are an egg scatterer, but the only thing different is they like to kind of build a nest. And you got to have adults.
So what does a nest look like then? What kind of like sticklebacks build nests?
Yeah, something simpler. Yeah, like to me it was just I used a lot of I always had those synthetic kind of mops. I used to get them from like aquaculture places. You can make mops out of yarn like you do for breeding rainbow fish, you know, like same sort of thing. And instead of like back in the day when we had 35 millimeter film, those little cases that the film came in, they were awesome because you could put weights in them and sink them, or you can take the weights out and they'd float. You know, now we use cork as a float. Now you got to tie it to something that's going to sink. But I would use acrylic yarn mops all the time. Like I probably have one right here. I can show you what I mean.
By the way, Cameron, I'm not taking any offense to him having a call review. I agree.
These were just ones that I just pulled out of a tank earlier. So this is just regular yarn, right? It's some sort of camouflage color. It's a mix of green and browns. It's to mimic nature. It's to mimic roots of plants, you know. But you can literally, this one's got a cork on it from a wine bottle, so it'll float. Or I could tie it to something and it would kind of sit in the water, kind of like a clump on the bottom of the tank. I found this type of yarn, and I love this stuff. This is another fully acrylic product. The cork flew off somewhere, but it's very different. I don't know how to describe it. I think you get it in a green or a brown. It's meant for making, like grandmothers make sweaters out of it, but it looks more like a moss. It's got a lot more little strands. So I think if somebody made a sweater out of this, it would look kind of hairy, I guess. I don't know. But I really like these ones. I've used these for 30 plus years and they work great. But I really love this kind of product. I don't know what the yarn's called, but I just found it. I found it at Walmart.
That looked very mossy.
Yeah, a guy looking like me walking into like a craft store, I get a few looks, right? So, I try to quickly get stuff, like sneak into that aisle in Walmart and throw it in the cart, and then hopefully nobody will say anything. But like you put a handful of these on the bottom of the tank, and sometimes you don't even need a thing to weigh them down. You literally just put this in the tank, put it under the water, squeeze all the air out of it, and they'll often just sink to the bottom. But you can put all sorts of stuff, like for breeding piranhas. You're generally like you guys you don't have access to them in New Zealand. Can you keep them in Scotland? Should be an issue, right?
Yeah, we can pretty much have anything.
But like to me, adding all those different botanicals. Now, if you're just going to breed the regular red belly one, they've been bred for so long in captivity, they'll adapt to almost everything. Which is why I was kind of bringing up that thing about the old guys breeding Oscars and angels and convicts. Have you ever kept a wild Oscar versus a pet store Oscar? It's it's like owning a basset hound or a pit bull. They're two totally different types of animal. A pet store Oscar is just this dumb pet, and they're awesome fish. They kind of train you, and they just kind of float around. That the tank is this big cumbersome guy, and you feed them. They become these great household pets. You get a wild caught Oscar, they are extremely cryptic. Like their patterning is that way for a reason. They hang up in all the tangles of branches and everything like that, and they dart out. They're like an ambush predator. You wouldn't see that with a pet store Oscar. They just float around in the tank. They know they're going to get fed. Totally.
Yeah,
and like for the piranhas, it's the same thing. Like I'm growing up a group of wild caught Tychochromis nateri, the red belly ones from a certain river system, and then I'm intending to put them in the big tank. Not 100% certain, but I'm growing them up right now because they're all probably about this size. So that's about 7 inches in size, I guess. I don't know what that is, 25 centimeters, 20 centimeters. And I'm growing them up now because once you have them now, you're fine. But they're predate on stuff. So anything I put in the tank with them, they'll probably kill and eat. But if I want to put a 12-foot Amazonian style tank and I want to have maybe a stingray and maybe an arowana, like all sorts of other stuff, maybe some Ultim Angels, I got to grow those piranhas up to a point that they're not as much a piscivore. Like if they're fed, they won't bother the other fish.
Yeah.
That's not the case with a lot of the species, like the blacks and the rhombius, those types. Like, no, those are a lot more challenging to keep. Most piranhas are challenging to keep as a group, except for a few. Caribes is one that I've done, and Naterae is one that I've done. I've done one more, I think, but I can't remember the name. Some of these are 25 years.
I can't remember the name for the one, but there's one that predates fish scales. That's its diet, it's fish scales.
With like silver fleck all over? Yeah, I've seen them called diamonds, but I think they also have that slanted front. Yeah, they would be related more to like the rhombius types, and they're very challenging to keep together.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Everybody has them one to a tank. That would make it a little bit more challenging to breed. Like I've kept stingrays multiple times over the years, and the only stingrays I've ever kept are just the regular Motoro. But the regular Motoro comes from all over South America. And if you get them from this river system, they'll get 30 inches. If you get them from that river system in that country, they'll get 5 feet. They're, eventually I think when they start, going in depth a little bit more, they're going to realize they have some very different species as well, not just, locations.
Yeah.
But they're a live bear. But the problem being is every one that I had was a surrender at a pet store. Every one of them that I got. And the problem is that they'd have them in these kind of touch tanks. And all I would think about, is in the back of my head is this is an animal that is venomous. This is an animal that can potentially really hurt someone. And I'm in like a family run pet store where little kids can get ignored and put their arm in the tank. So I thought, if this ever happened and a kid got stuck by that, that means stingrays are going to be legal in Canada. That's just the way our governments think, right? It's going to be instant. Can't have that. And then what's next? What's next? What's next? So I would take those out of the store and I would put them in my 750-gallon tank. So I had one that was like 30 inches in diameter, like bigger than a garbage can lid, called Big Mama. But the minute one of the young boys sexed out, you can't keep them together. Anybody that's a stingray breeder knows you cannot keep them together. The males are relentless. So my big female eventually died because I was away when it happened, when the male became sexually mature. And he constantly harassed and bit holes all around her disc to the point that I came home, she was floating at the top of the thing, because in the wild, they can swim away. Same thing with the piranhas. You know what I mean? Some of those more challenging species, they can swim away. In captivity, they can't. So in captivity, the people that breed stingrays on a commercial or even for fun generally keep the sexes apart and throw a male in for a weekend party, have some fun with all the females, and then they take the male out. Even the public aquariums, every public aquarium I've been to, and I've been to 9 in the past year and a half, I've been behind the scenes in more than half of them because I know some of the curators and stuff. None of them keep boys and girls in the same enclosure ever.
Wow.
It's not worth the hassle because they also have no outlet for getting rid of the offspring in a public aquarium, right?
Yeah. That's quite true in lots of things, like big fish, little fish. They can't get away. So if you've got an aggressive male in a 2-foot tank, for example, the female can't get away regardless. And like in the wild, they can swim away. So I think there's a lot of misconception when it comes to aggression on some fish because they're just not kept in a big enough area to kind of void what that is.
But we can also go back and look at those habitats a little bit better. Like I remember back in the day, in the early 70s, getting the mixed boxes of Tropheus. And for us trying to figure out how to keep some of these things, one of the things that we started putting in the tanks was lots and lots of PVC pipe cutoffs, ABS pipe cutoffs, plastic waste pipes. We just cut off little sections. We saved them all. And we just throw piles of them in a tank. We'd even suspend them in the top row of the tank, because if you ever look with African cichlids, a lot of the ones when they get really, really aggressive, where does the one that's getting beat up always go? Top corners.
Top corner.
Right? They don't go sit on the bottom. They always go up to the top corners. So we put shelters up in the top corners. The only problem being, though, is the pipe is the same diameter right through. You look versus that, take that same mentality and work with people that breed Central American cichlids, any of the really hyper aggressive ones, the males this big, the females this big. Well, then we can put things in the tank that the female can get in to find shelter, but that the male can't get in. Or those, do you guys use those lighting grid diffusers? Lighting,
they're about.
You know what I'm talking about? We call it egg crates. You know, you could put those in and make little holes in it that the female can swim through and the male can't. You know, those are all tricks and tools or things that are in our arsenal of things to try and find ways and means to get them to breed.
It's all part of the puzzle.
Yeah, it's to me. I've always viewed it as a puzzle, because like every fish requires something different. And I have a lot of tools at my disposal to figure it out. But there's also several fish that I've never been successful with in breeding. And it's because I did something wrong. I either missed a piece, put a piece in the wrong spot or something. Like, I'll give credit. There's a very well-respected gentleman in my area, Mr. Jim Cummings.
Oh,
and he's very passionate about Madagascar cichlids right now. That's awesome. He does a great job with them. He's also been like an icon for doing New World cichlids ever since I was a little kid. So this guy's forgotten more in the past few years that he's learned. Like he's an icon. But like he was very successful, and I mean successful, and he bred them twice and twice only. The Lamina, Paranitropus neurosati, I believe is the species. That's that bright neon orange rheophilic species from Madagascar. Well, he grew up youngsters. He got them from the same wholesaler. They came from the same place that I got mine from, but he grew up youngsters and amongst the tank of other Malagasy cichlids. And as they became sexually mature, they paired off, no different than a New World species, and they produced offspring, and they took care of it. My reason that I wasn't successful is I would go to Leif de Mason at Old World Exotics, where they all came from, and I'd say, okay, well, go in the pond and send me 5 or 6 adults. So he sent me 5. I had 2 full-size sexed pairs and an extra, and I landed them in my 750-gallon tank. And by the time the bags were floating around on the top of the tank just to get the temperatures the same, 4 out of 5 were deflated because they were trying to kill each other through the bags. Wow. Now, I landed them in that 750-gallon tank. So it's an 8 foot by 4 foot footprint, and it was 32 tall or something. Big, giant, wet, dry filter. But it had big Achera catfish, Pilmodellid catfish predators, a lot of mix of New World cichlids, both South and Central American. It was really kind of my catch-all tank for a lot of the retired breeders and stuff. My display tank, big silver dollars and things like that. And I landed them there basically because of the aggression level, and I thought this would be perfect. The piece of the puzzle that I missed, though, is that these are ancient fish. They have no predators in the wild. Nothing. And I introduced them into a tank full of not necessarily predators, but more modern fishes, highly evolved fish. And, I don't know if anybody's really ever thought about it, but like the minute I walk through the threshold of my front door and I take that first step or I open the door, there's a vibration chain that goes through the house. It might be very, very minute, but that vibration chain carries through the house. And if you were to just look around the corner, your fish already know you're there because they'll all be up in that corner looking for food. Try it. Sneak into a room one day when all the lights are on, excuse me, and just kind of poke your head around. They already know you're there because they sense the vibrations using their lateral line. So they sense it. Well, the problem that happened for me is every time these fish, they'd breed for me all the time, but they'd breed on the wall of the tank. So then I'd go and put a slate where the wall was, and then they'd breed beside it. Pot, and they breed beside the pot. They never bred on anything that I could take it off short of using a razor blade. But the problem being is every time that they bred, before I could get to the spawn, the other fish would have already taken it out because the Madagascar fish were the first ones to leave their spawn. Because in the wild, they don't have any reason to defend it. They don't have any predators.
Yeah. If there's
New
no
World
predators, then they'll just
know that
safe.
it's just a food source, so they go to it right away. So I was never successful at ever breeding that fish to capacity, but they bred for me all the time.
Yeah.
It's just I missed some of the cues of the puzzle. And I know very, very much why I don't have it. And I'll work with it again if I can find it. But it's a very challenging species to keep, very, very hyper aggressive. And one other tool that I never mentioned, but Oliver Lucanus, do you know who he is? Gentleman from Montreal, Canada. He's well known. He's an explorer all over the world. He's a very dear friend. I get a lot of fish from him. Mm-hmm. He did a presentation, I'm going to say 20, 25 years ago, that I saw. I don't even remember where it was. And it brought me right back to my childhood, and with the tinkering and the thinking about the way we do our habitats. So you go back, we started back in the day with like box filters, and then we evolved and we got to like in the 80s, we had under gravel filters, and they were, whoa, there was no such thing as a power filter or anything yet. And then we got these power heads, and they were just a motor that we could put on the top of an under gravel filter. And they worked like an under gravel filter, whether people like them or not. I've had stores with 300 plus tanks where the entire store's running on under gravels. They work if you understand the basics. But modern people want to have fast and more efficient and everything. And we don't want to have an understanding. How many people do you ask about the nitrogen cycle of a fish tank? And they can tell you exactly what's happening, but they won't be able to explain any of the science behind it. Mm-hmm. Right? They just know what they read in the book, and that's it.
Yeah.
So after we had the under gravels, we had these power heads, and now it's a power-driven under gravel, not just air. And then we got power filters. And after hang on the back power filters, then we got canister filters. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And the whole world just kept evolving. But now you look at the average person that has a fish room that breeds fish, they have sponge filters in most of their tanks, generally. Hamburg mat filters, which are an awesome, awesome filter. And they're very, very efficient. And not only, when you drive them with a good air pump, they produce a lot of flow, or the little standing sponge filters that just draw air up and down. And we could breed fish with that without issue. Now, what triggered that talk that Oliver did that really brought it home for me was there was one fish that I was successful in breeding, and it's not going to sound like an accomplishment today because the fish is very, very common now, and you could keep it in a 20-gallon tank and breed it with a clay pot and a sponge filter. But that fish, when it came in out of the wild, was borderline almost impossible to keep alive, let alone breed. And back then, we also used to think that the eggs were light sensitive. So there's all sorts of factors involved. And the fish in question is the common buffalo head, blockhead, Steatocranus cassoarius. It's a very cool fish in the trade now.
Real cool fish.
You look at that fish in its habitat in the wild, and it's like class 5 rapids. So it's hyper aggressive. You look at other fish, the lamina that I just mentioned from Madagascar. You look at a lot of those goby cichlids that have reduced swim bladder, a lot from West Africa. You got some of the pike cichlids that have reduced swim bladder from South America. You have some of these fish that are so hyper aggressive. Some of the Central American cichlids as well. They're just so mean, and they've got this misnomer in the hobby that these things are aggressive, and they're not. The habitats we set up are incorrect. If you add current to these tanks, and I'm not talking a little bit of current, you add a lot of current. Like you look at some of these habitats, if you go down to the local stream near you and look at those habitats that are in your backyards or your areas, outside the urban areas, and you stand in a stream that's only a foot tall, the water's rushing past you. These are the habitats of fish. There's no slow bubble. A bubbling would be a lake. So if it's a lake species, the water can be tranquil. If it's a river species, generally it's not going to be. If it's a lake species in an area that has a seasonal change, like in an areas like Scotland or something where we get these seasonal changes like torrential rains in the spring, or like in Canada, we get these melts where all of a sudden there's all this excess water rushes in, same as like we talked about in South America. These are seasonal changes that'll change that habitat. Well, those are pieces of the puzzle that we're missing. But Oliver did this presentation on this type of pump. It's called a linear pump. And I don't know, he was selling the pump, but I think it's designed by that company in Germany. And they have that one tank. I'm sure everybody's probably seen it. There's this one tank that has loricariids in it.
Yep.
It's not this the big wholesaler somewhere in Germany. And the tank's at kind of an angle, Like at one side, the water level's this different. At the other end, it's nothing. But it's just moving water. And those are habitats. And in this presentation that he did, he had like underwater footage of wild discus living in like class 5 rapids because they find sanctuary behind a big boulder, right? Because there's going to be these little eddies and currents, and everywhere there's different. To us, we look at it from above, it's like, holy crap, how could anything live in this? But each in that environment, there's different niches within that environment that the fish can take refuge in. So like to me, I played around with that. In that 750-gallon tank, one of the big fish I had was Bacorti, Synecles Bacorti. It's from Lago Isabel. It's a big, massive water cow from Central America. They were like 15, 16 inches, gorgeous green and yellow fish, 15 inches tall, this big. And I could give them a head of romaine lettuce and they would destroy it. But they were just a big lunker of a fish. John's looking the fish up. But I remember when I took this pump, and there was a company called Hydor in North America. I work in the industry, so I remember talking to them about this theory, and they just developed one of their water fans, I guess you call them, water pumps, and it was a number 8. I don't even think they manufacture anymore, but it was the size of a Canadian football, which is like kind of like your rugby. It looks like it pointed on the ends. It's brown, not a soccer, and they gave me this thing to try it. Now, the reason I needed that biggest one was not that I needed that monstrous pump. It's they use a magnet to go through the glass.
Yeah.
And this is a wood tank that was 3/4 inches plywood on the side. So I needed something that could at least hold on to that side because there's no way to mount it. There's no clip that hangs on the top. It was just this magnet. So he says, well, this one works with 3/4 inch, no problem. So I brought it home and I put it on this tank and I turned it on. And within seconds, these giant 16-inch fish were thrown across like a kid throwing a baseball in the tank. They're just thrown across the tank. They're, what the hell happened? But within 3 days, all the fish could swim in that current as if it didn't exist. And to me, that is the type of stuff that we as aquarists got to start looking at and investigating. Like that's why like some of my videos, people might not get it because I'm not showing the ooh and all the time. But putting a camera in a local stream and just seeing what it looks like, taking temperature readings, taking water chemistry readings, and just trying to get that science behind it and figuring out like what you have in your backyard is not going to be that different. There'll be water chemistry differences. Yes, there are other factors, but everything we want to learn about nature is available to us. We just have to look.
Wow.
I go way off.
Having a big high-powered rapids aquarium is just something that I would love to have at home. I think it's quite a specialist setup though, because you need the length, and I don't know, but there should be more of them available. It should be more something that we can achieve, like all the different sizes of aquariums. There must be a system where we can create like an aquarium with an outer rim as well for the overflow and have it cycling around, because I think we'd get much more out of the species having them in that environment, especially like the small goby species, and they're just mind-blowing.
Well, there's stuff I've never even seen in Canada. I see all these different gobies out of the northern streams in China. I've never seen them in Canada. I've seen them in shows in the States, but I've never come across them. But the problem with trying to set up these systems is we set them up to what we think visually they should look like. And I've seen people that have done these pipe networks connected to pumps. And that's all below so it takes water from here, moves it across the bottom, and then puts it up. But almost every pump that's devised in the aquarium trade is the same type of flow. It's very directional. And you go to a river, the whole river's moving. There's not just one spot that's moving in a river, right? So it's very, very challenging. I've never had one. I've never owned one. But I do have the Congo tank that I've got. And when Oliver finally gets me the fish I want back for it, once I've done the move and the changeover, I want to put one of these on. And I can't think of the name of it. It's almost like they're like a wave maker where the fans move. Yeah. So it's not always a constant in the same spot. I can't think of the branding. Jabio or something. There's they're these long pumps. So they go on the top of the tank. And I think those are to play with.
Quite a reef keeping tool that is, because obviously reefs are swishing around everywhere. So it's quite a popular pump or device in that world for that reason as well. Yeah.
But then you got to
what we
go
could do.
big boulders in the tank, you know?
Yeah.
People are shy. Like I see people's tanks all the time. It's like they scape it for what they think it should look like. No. Have that tree sticking 3 feet out of the tank, you know? Do stuff like that. You know, have fun. You look at the aquascapers, those guys that are big into aquascaping, they've changed the game. Like most of those tanks aren't really practical for fish keeping, but they've changed the game in the way that they do everything. And like those giant stumps, you see them on the internet all the time. Giant stumps that, you know, like it's a full tree coming out of a 20-gallon tank. It goes up into the rafters. You know,
I've seen that.
What you see in that tank is awesome.
I know.
Yeah,
it's like they literally just take one section of a local stream and replicate it in their aquarium.
Yeah.
And it looks amazing outside of the tank and inside of the tank together. And you're captivating the whole nature element. And if you can incorporate pill bugs or slaters grown on that piece of wood, which I've done in an old aquarium I had this round stump that I found at a bog just across from me first day. And I was in my garden for about a year and a half. And by the time I put it in the aquarium, it was full of wood lice. So they all came up and lived on the thick top part. I didn't have any fish that would eat them, but it was like a double ecosystem. So it was getting what was going on above and below the water.
See, I love the idea of doing a tank that, and mine, once I get the room finished, the basic room, then the pressure's gone. Then I can know, like, well, I'm short a video today. I could go, let's do an update on these. Let's do an update. I've always got that available. I've never had that available to me yet because I'm always behind the ball because I travel constantly. Like I left on the 30th of October and I've been home 2 days till today, you know, like, so it gets challenging then when you can't do the stuff at home that you want to. But I like the idea. I've seen a few examples online where you'll take a tank, doesn't matter the size, and you'll have like a stump, and the stump will be in the tank, but you'll have a cut in the tank, and you'll also be on the outside of the tank, you know, and you have all those plantings up on the stump as well, where the glass box is the fish section, the aquatic section, but it's the whole environment surrounds it as well.
Yeah, I love that.
Never stop experimenting. That's the fun.
I know, because if you do it right, you can watch both sections evolve. Yep. You have the fish in underwater and plants and whatever, but in my case, I had blackworms living in the wood under the water, and I had millipedes and centipedes and all grown on the top, and they were all multiplying. So it was like double. I was feeding both the dry and the wet section.
That's awesome.
I loved it. I really did.
We get enough isopods and bugs that just show up in the house. And every time I'll be anywhere, my wife will send me a video and she'll just show me a picture of her hand holding some sort of bug. And I go, not mine, because it's either a cricket. It's not like if the crickets that live outside are black. The crickets we buy to feed things are brown. They're called camel crickets. So she posts me pictures of these things all the time that she finds in the house. Yeah, she'll send me stuff all the time. Well, we find pill bugs, wood lice, or whatever are the native ones, the endemic ones here. She'll post me pictures of those all the time. I go, that's not mine, because mine will get some of the species, the offspring, the mankai are so small they'll actually go through the mesh on the thing. I have about 3 species that'll all of a sudden just show up in one of the other tubs. It's like, how did they get there? We'll find them in the house. We don't talk about
and you've managed to get that past the wife easily enough, or was there a bit of convincing on that? Understood.
We don't talk.
Understood. I get it. Okay.
I did videos where she would be away one day. She'd be doing stuff. She'd be at work, and I'd be filming a video, and I'd use their kitchen, like upstairs. I'd do a video on the kitchen counter, and I made a little thing. I downloaded it off the internet, and I totally forged her signature, and I called it the wife permission slip. I showed on the video, and then in one video, she came while I was filming. She was doing something in another room, and she came. She goes, "I'll take that." She took my wife permission slip away from me, so I haven't done anything other footage on the kitchen.
Well, there's always a saying that I've kind of lived by or promoted is it's easier to say sorry than it is to get permission, and that's a fact.
I bought her this giant pot, like a real nice. I went to a restaurant supply place and I bought her real nice, heavy gauge I think it's aluminum or whatever, like a stock pot for making soup.
Yeah.
Real nice one. It was big, but it's also conveniently the best one for soaking and boiling down botanicals.
Absolutely.
The problem when you boil botanicals is they leach out all the
get
tannic
these leaves
acid.
in it, Cam. If it's not
That sort of stuff. But then when you boil that down, it leaches the tannic acid, and the tannic acid etches the aluminum. So now the pot is permanently stained at a water line of this brown stuff. So now she won't use it. So now it's my pot. So I don't know if I want
no.
And I bet she says that you bought it for yourself and it was never a gift. Yeah.
Over the years, I've owned for the fish room food processors, any Tupperware that ever comes downstairs for any reason, like the little pre-used containers and stuff. They all just become property of the fish room.
Yeah,
they're not allowed back up to come down.
I hear that.
Out the back of my shop is full of all sorts of bits and pieces that have come from home and have been used once or twice, and they're never being used ever again in the kitchen.
Yeah, well, but years ago, I was breeding plecos, and the best thing for feeding plecos, other things other than food, like a piece of zucchini or squash or anything like that, is I would just take a fork, chick a chunk on a fork, and just throw it in the tank. The fork sinks down, holds it perfectly in place.
Yeah.
Until we got in the kitchen one day, and there was no forks left. Where's the forks going? Like, I don't know. That's weird. I have no idea.
I know.
We've had a wee question. There we go. What do you make of wild insects being fed to fishes?
I think it's an integral part of the diet of most of them. I think most of the fish foods that we actually have commercially, I love this whole new wave of black soldier fly and different types of things, as long as they're actually made properly. Because the problem is, a lot of these companies are buying the offsets, the junk or a flour or something like that derived from these products. Like I really love there's a black soldier fly one out of Sarah out of Germany. It's
fantastic.
Incredible food. I use that a lot.
I love that. Absolutely. Yep.
Northfin has Bug Pro. Like that's another exceptional one. And this is more getting back to nature. Like you were talking about piranhas. One of the real keys for piranhas is feeding them correctly. Now, the rhombius types, those ones with the slanted heads that we were talking about, those are true piscivores. They are true predators. That's why you have to kind of keep them solitary in captivity unless you have anything but the largest aquarium. They're really, really challenging to keep together as a group because you feed them that frenzy. All it takes is a scratch on one of them, and all of a sudden that one's killed. But with the other ones, their diet isn't fish. Their main diet would be insect larvae and stuff like that, little crustaceans and stuff. So the thing I feed my group of piranhas, because I'm not trying to grow them up fast, I'm trying to grow them up naturally, is the thing I probably feed them the most would be bloodworms. Frozen bloodworms for piranhas that are 6-7 inches in length.
Yeah.
But I also feed them market shrimp, uncooked raw market shrimp with all the shell and everything on them, and I also feed them like smelts. It's like saltwater minnows. I don't know what people must buy them for food. I don't eat any seafood, never have. So I go to like the Asian markets and I find all this great stuff for feeding fish, like the puffers and everything. Puffers need things to work their teeth off on, right? So always need things like clams and mussels and crayfish and things with hard shells. But
bloodworms get a bit of a bad name for various reasons, and obviously you just said you feed a lot of bloodworms to your piranha. What's your sort of thoughts on the bad name or the bad nutritional breakup of bloodworms?
It depends on the ones that you're buying. Like Hikari is the premium brand. I actually sell that brand in Canada. It's one of the aquatic brands that my company represents. And the Hikari ones with all their sterilization processes, I've never honestly ever had an issue with them. I like the fact that I can get them as a normal, or I can get these jumbo ones. They might very well be a different insect. I don't know. But the jumbo ones are what I use generally for a lot of the larger killifish where they can take a full thing in. But then my passions and interest in fish has changed a lot. So I've got probably about 20 different types of weird kerosins, like little small tetras and stuff, because there's this whole new wave of all these new fish coming out of Brazil. So I've got about half a dozen or a dozen different species here of all these tanks. And some of them have like 5 species in the tank, just because every time the list comes out, they say, oh, I got to have those. I don't have a tank. We'll go somewhere.
Yeah, make it work.
I've never had an issue, but I know there are some lower quality ones that have all sorts of other junk in them.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking bloodworms, though, not blackworms or tubifex worms, right?
Yeah, frozen bloodworms.
Yeah. Tubifex worms and stuff like that. Some of those are raised, they're basically effluent, like they're an effluent worm. So they're going to be raised in like sewage naturally. So if you're collecting it out of the wild, you could be introducing all sorts of problems. But I don't feed them as a live source just because I don't have access to it. I do grindle worms. I've done white worms for years. I don't have white worms right now because there's no room for the fridge in the fish room right now, but I will once the room's redone. I've always done a lot of different types of live foods, but live foods that make sense, not just for the fish, but for me. Like vinegar eels, easy. You have any top fish that, needs microscopic food, it's great. Micro worms, huge pain in the butt for me because just due to my travel. It's legitimately, as soon as I get home, I got to set these all up again. Otherwise they're going to crash. So I don't generally do micro worms at all anymore. I find the grindle worms pretty much solve the problem for me, and they're easy at room temperature, and they're long term. Like I have one that the lid cracked on it and it's been infested by some sort of gnat or something like that. There's little gnat larvae all around it, and I've got to reset it. But I haven't done anything since before I left for Africa, and it's thriving still. Throw a little handful of cat food in it. It's super easy, right? Those are the type of live foods to me that work. Brine shrimp is so expensive, and it's a pain.
I've been playing with grindle worms recently as well. The only issue I've found is if I let them sit in direct sunlight for about 5 days straight, they seem to not enjoy that very much. But that's on me, not on them. Everything else has been fine.
Well, one of my buds gave me this little container. It's got all those little green scrub pads, and they're all set up in a. You know which one I'm talking? And I don't fully understand it.
Yeah.
And he hands me this thing, and he said it's so easy to work with, but I've never set one up from scratch myself. I have all the Tupperwares. I have more of the scratch pads. I just never have done it because the lid, as I say, on my main one, the lid broke, and I got to replace it. So.
Yeah, super simple to set up. Super hardy. Feed them once a week, make sure there's a little bit of moisture in them, and don't give them direct sunlight for 5 days straight, and you're under control.
Yeah, mine sit on the ground underneath one of the fish racks, and I literally do nothing other than maybe once every 2 weeks or so I throw a little, maybe a quarter a cup of cat food in it. That's it.
Simple, yeah.
They're very efficient.
We've had another comment here from Rebecca. There was an interesting paper on how piranha, silver dollar, pacu heads, particularly lips and soft tissues, relate to their diets. Yeah. That's very, very true. I've never done any studies. I think that's Rebecca, freshwater ichthyology. That might be Rebecca. Yes.
I've never done any studies on that group of fish, but I did study the jaw structures and the pharyngeal dental plates of cichlids for a long time. That was a big passion of mine. And you could literally hand me this little tiny bony structure, and we could go over the whole dietary needs almost of that type of fish in general, but that's very, very true. Another one who Rebecca would know very well is a good friend is Daniel Convetterlein in Germany, in Dornheim. And he stayed with me for about a week, and we did a couple of videos at the very, very beginning of my infancy of my channel. And his whole background is the study of these lip structures on pleco lips and how they can move. So like a pleco imagine those class 5 types rapids like you see in the Xingu system. We see from above, it's so turbulent. And this fish just basically moves around in its habitat like this. So we think of it as, is it letting go of its suction cup? If it did, it'd be, whoa, right? Not. It can individually control all these individual little tiny structures on its lip. So yeah, like a centipede or a millipede, it does all these little things. And I don't want to misquote it, but I believe they're called unculi. And each one of them, even at the microscopic level, you go down and you go further and further using electron microscope. There are all these little, and they're in that video that I did with him. It's actually the part 2 with Daniel Convetterlein. If anybody wants to find it, you can get the link for it. And it's all the little structure. It's absolutely fascinating stuff. But it all started literally by watching a fish in his tank and just kind of moving along on the glass. How does it do that? Because you'll watch a pleco on your front glass and it might move its fins a little bit, but it really doesn't do a lot. It's there. but there's all sorts of microscopic activity happening on that dental plate or the lip plates. And yeah, she's right. All the piranhas, all these fish, there's so much more to learn on this stuff. I haven't done a dissection on a fish though for 3 decades. I used to have my old fish room at the house used to be called the lab at my old house. And I used to have my dissection tables, my microscopes, and I did my own pathology and I did all that stuff. And like, if something wasn't working or breeding, I would literally do dissections on like, what piece of the puzzle am I missing? I've done all the environmental ones that I can address. I've done everything I can think of short of dietary. So let's dissect some. You're talking fish that you've imported might be $100 fish. And you're going to freeze it and cut it up and start trying to figure it out. Maybe a piece of the puzzle we're missing is inside. I don't know.
Yeah. This is genuinely fascinating, and I'm loving every single second of it.
We can go on for hours.
I'm sure we could.
Just be nattering on. It's just ramblings of an old dude.
Hey, I like them. I like them a lot. Predominantly, you're a cichlid person, correct?
Well, that's probably what I'd be most known for in recent years, I guess. I've been a member of the ACA for 30 plus years, the American Cichlid Association. Mm-hmm. I'm on the American Cichlid Association speakers program. So, when I travel and stuff, I was on the Marineland one before that. But I've gone through different phases, like I've never gone through a bird phase. Let's make sure we get that out of the way because birds are food, not friends. But I have kept, I went through a very strong pleco phase right around, I'm going to say early 90s, 89 to 91, 92 is when the Xingu system really opened up. And there was this new flood of all these incredible new fish that came out. Right at that time period, I was pretty much all pike cichlids and loricariids. And I've had a few odds and ends, but almost none of the fish had any descriptions. I don't even think the L numbers existed back then, the L numbering system. I think that came out after. But I remember getting the, foot long. I think we called it the Trump pleco because it was so expensive. This is long before he became a president. We're talking in the 80s and 90s. And it was just such an expensive fish. And I think that's now called L25. Pseudocanthicus. I don't know if it's described or not, but it was like this jet black cactus-like covered fish with blood red fins, just stunning. Yep. And then we had the L14, the Sunshine, and the Mango, and like they all have these stupid, goofy names because none of them were described. But the pikes were the same. Like I've only bred maybe 3 or 4 species of pike cichlids. And there's not many people in the world that have bred a lot of pike cichlids. They're fish that are challenging. They need large areas for territory. They're hyper aggressive. They need a lot more current, more than likely, than we could ever provide, to really give them that to control that aggression. Because you add those massive pumps on that I was talking to a tank of fish that are super, super aggressive. You can now limit the aggression because the minute they come up into the water column to go and fight something, they get blasted away by the water, by the pump because it's too fast for them. So fish that often live in those habitats have to defend a small little territory. They'll defend it to the death because the minute they leave that territory, they're going to be blown 100 yards down the stream. They'll have to find something new again. So maybe that's part of the puzzle. I don't know. But I did a lot of those. I went through a big phase where, back in the infancy with rainbow fish, but coming back into the hobby, looking at the hobby nowadays, the rainbow fish list is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of species and locales now. Back then we had about 2 dozen. That was it. And there's people like Gary Lange in the States. There was a gentleman in Australia, I think his name was Ron Bowman. And we used to order eggs because you couldn't export a species out of Australia, but he would collect eggs and put them in these little tiny vials. I had one here. But these little tiny glass vials with little bits of like yarn. And he'd put the eggs on the yarn and put some clean water and a little bit of methylene blue. And we'd post these to people all around the world. That's how most of all the rainbows got out originally. Yeah. And same thing we do with killifish. I've gone through phases where I've done killifish, but killifish, I only like what I call the dirt killies, the ones that generally spawn in dirt. And then you dry it out and put it away. And then 6 months later, you re-wet it. That fascinates me.
It's a phenomenal evolutionary thing.
All sorts of stuff.
Actually managing it.
But cichlids is one that, like, I did 13 years of Lake Tanganyika, and then I got introduced into, that's when after that I got into cories and plecos and all that sort of stuff kind of came about, and the pike cichlids. And then I got into New World cichlids. And then South America and Central America just had this whole new world of promise. There was just so much more diversity that I'd never experienced. But I've dabbled in a bit of everything. I've bred all sorts of barbs and tetras and a couple of 3 or 4 puffer species and Clarius catfish, like it's all pieces of the puzzle. But like, that's why I asked you at the beginning, like, what's your interest? What's your interest? Mine was just figuring out to breed that species. And then I generally moved on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just did something else.
So what do you call a success in a breed? Like you've done it once, you've been able to replicate it, you've then grown the fry out to juvenile stage. Where do you go, cool, I've been successful in this.
Yeah.
Next,
at what point do you check the box and say that's done?
But within the realms of what is considered a successful spawn. So example would be like Synodontis multipunctatus, the little Tanganyikan cuckoo catfish.
Yeah.
Easy to breed, but you don't breed the fish by itself. It needs a host. So it breeds with excuse me. It breeds with Victorians, Malawis. It doesn't really matter. As long as you've got a mouth brooder, it'll generally breed with them fairly well. You just don't want something that's super, super aggressive. And you want something that's a little bit, I don't know the right wording, because all these fish are all captive bred now. In the wild, the species that would live in the areas where these fish are would be very waspy to watch for it, because it happens and they're still successful at breeding. But in captivity, you take something like a red zebra or a Victorian or something like that's just kind of oblivious to the world. You'll breed it. But a successful spawning of Synodontis cats that use that type of platform for breeding would be maybe 5. Because it's not going to be dependent on the Synodontis. It's going to be dependent on the host.
Yes.
Right. And the Synodontis babies develop and hatch faster than the host's offspring. So the other fry are developing eggs in the mouth, become the first food source for the Synos. Right. It doesn't mean they're all done that way. There's lots of species that we know nothing about their how to breed them or their husbandry because they might migrate. Clown loaches will never be bred in captivity, just in an aquarium. They're going to have to be hormone induced because they migrate. A lot of the knife fish and stuff like that, not all, but some of the knife fish are the same thing. Clown knives, the big clown knives out of India, they breed almost identical to a cichlid, but they need a massive trigger. They need a seasonal change, like a massive break a heater, crank the heater up, let it go to 95 degrees. That'll trigger a spawn in them, because what would happen, they would spawn generally as the water's going down, where they can control it better.
Yeah. I've just seen recently someone in Europe has successfully bred black ghost knives in their aquarium, which I thought was really, really phenomenally cool. And then
they're being bred in Florida in large numbers using hormone induction, and they've been bred a long time in Asia on the farms, and I can't say if they're using hormone, if they're breeding them naturally. I don't know. There's another gentleman I just saw that bred something I don't think's ever been bred in captivity, was the Erythrinus, the what do you call Peruvian rainbow or Peruvian red wolffish. It's a dwarf wolffish. It's not one of those giant mean ones. They get about 6 inches. They're still a bit hell on wheels, but that to me was very impressive as well, because he had not only to breed it, but he also documented all the different stages, which I thought was really
fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one thing doing it, then documenting it to be able to replicate things. I think that's the interesting thing when it comes to reproducing fish, is replicating. It's not just a fluke. We've tried this, that worked. We've tried this, it hasn't worked. We've tried this again, and this has worked. So that is where we kind of go with it.
You achieve it yourself, but then you can hand the information over, and then they can follow your steps and also replicate. So I think that's a good marker.
I think the European market, or not market, but the European aquatic hobby, outside of the North American market, there's and I don't want to generalize it, but I kind of have to, it's kind of viewed as a lot more arrogant. In Europe, a lot of the communities, like they have those L number days and stuff like that. And it's the scientific community meshing together with the hobbyists, because the scientific community is generally using dead fish, for measurements and all that sort of stuff. They don't see the behaviors that aquarists do. So we have both things to offer to each other. It's just finding ways and means to do that in a conducive way that we both benefit from it, or the animal, the species benefits from it. And we're starting to see more and more of that. And that's nothing but positive to me.
Yeah, I think more people are like Rebecca are diving into academia and meshing the hobby as well, and focusing in on niche elements of the hobby and bringing that back. Once they've achieved that, they're bringing that back into the hobby.
Yep.
In the forms
she does some incredible work. Like she is definitely someone to keep your eyes on, because she's going to do some amazing things. She's coming to speak in the US, I think it's in September, at the Keystone Clash, which is an event I did 4 years in a row. But it's just time-wise, it always falls exactly in the same window when I'm doing I'm the director of aquatics for the Canadian Pet Expo teams, and that falls right in the window of that. So I'm never able to attend it right now. But that's her first appearance, I believe, in the States. So anybody that's watching this, she is definitely someone to keep your eye on, because she's going to do some amazing things. Very
totally.
Yeah.
Fantastic human being to talk to about.
I've never met her and I've never spoken to her, but I'm just watching what she does and some of the way she posts, the way she holds herself. She's a very passionate individual, very knowledgeable.
She's been ever present in Facebook groups that I've kind of been admin for maybe 7 years now. She's just a constant presence and a welcome presence, because she brings the knowledge, and the way she hands it over, she doesn't come over arrogant in the slightest, because she's approachable, and she's like the missing link between science and the hobby.
Yep.
I think anyway, here in the UK especially.
Yeah, she's very similar to Daniel in the way, like she's that new breed of scientist that was passionate and then has taken that passion and you brought it into academia. Yes. And I've never met her, I've never spoken to her, but she has that same type of personality as does Daniel. So if you're listening, Rebecca, I apologize if you view that as a negative. Daniel's a dear friend, but he has that passion and that never-ending quest to find out stuff, and he literally just by watching a fish on the glass is what triggered his interest and his studies and his focus. And to me, that's the best way to do it. Never stop questioning, never stop observing. Like to me, like as much as I said at the beginning, like my main interest is in breeding fish. It's not anymore. I really don't have anything to prove to anybody. I don't have, I don't care. I keep fish for me. And as much as I do the stuff when it comes to the spiders and the habitats, I really just enjoy really creating these nice type of habitats where I can witness these type of behaviors. You take that 12-foot tank that I'm going to be building, and I had a 750 before. Most people would think, well, a bigger tank allows me to keep bigger fish. No. Put smaller fish in those big environments. And I trust me, you'll see behaviors that you never experienced before, even from things as common as a tetra. Like people don't get it, but like they just group tetras as tetras. Well, piranha's a tetra, right? Silver dollar's a tetra. But like a neon tetra and a cardinal tetra, even though they look similar, cardinal tetras are a schooling fish. Neon tetras don't really school. They're more of a pair fish. You put neon tetras in a tank and it's kind of chaotic. They're not really smooth. But you put rummy nose or cardinals, and then generally the school goes and then turns around and goes, right? Neons are more like some of the barbs where they're just kind of all over the place. But we all lump them together because they all just have that same name.
Yeah, for sure. I think we've got about 5 minutes to go before you've got to shoot off. Is that about right? Yep. So we'll just get on to what we call the School of Six, which is 6 really short form questions and short form answers.
For me?
It's not. Yeah, no, I think we should get that okay.
Oh, whatever.
So the first question is, if you're doing a coin toss, do you do heads or tails?
What? Tails? I don't know.
If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
I don't know. To go back in time? Redo some of the things? I don't know. But then I'd miss out on the stuff that I've already learned, right?
Yeah.
Miss the time with my kids? I don't know.
Paper, scissors, rock. Paper, scissors, rocks. What's your first call?
What's the what?
Paper, scissors, rocks. What's your first call?
Rock.
Paper.
Yeah,
rock.
yeah, rock.
Cool. If you could have a meal with anybody, live or dead, at any point in the history of time, who would that be?
I'd be able to go back and have a dinner with my dear friend, Mr. Wayne Leibel, who was the one that my mentor for years. He's the one whose face I have tattooed on my thigh. He's the one that basically embraced all my passions and stuff. And they're talking an ichthyologist, a scientist that would spend any amount of time to help a young man over the phone, hours, leading through a dissection.
Yeah.
Wow.
Are you a tea or a coffee drinker?
I don't drink coffee at all. I grew up English-Irish, so I grew up with very strict tea times, but I don't really drink it anymore. I can. It just, yeah.
Not for you? Yep. And what is your unicorn fish? This can be either keeping, breeding, seeing in the wild, taking photos, anything like that. What is the one fish that you want to be around or whatever way the most in your life?
It would probably, right now, there would probably be two. Not necessarily. One would be a species. The one species would to have that orange fish from Madagascar again, to do it properly. Set some different tanks up, set up more than one tank of them, but to acquire that many of them would be extremely costly and very challenging, because there's only one person in North America I know that's ever bred them other than Jim. The second one would be my more the interest of where I want to go next, and that would be in the moramids, which is all the elephant nose type fish, the weekly electronic fish from the Western Africa. And that's what I'm kind of waiting on for the next phase for me to do stuff in the, because they've bred a few of them and I don't know if it's hormone induction, but to me, they are fascinating fish that we know nothing about.
Very good. They're cool, quite a cool fish. I have to agree there.
Yep.
Well, that basically has come to our time. So again, thank you very much for being with us. It's greatly appreciated. I'm sure that everybody that has been watching or listening have thoroughly enjoyed what you had to say. So thank you very much.
I never saw the chat. Nothing comes up other than that one thing that you put up there. So I wouldn't have a clue.
I
didn't see anything.
I've never been on the other side.
I know why, because mine says private chat. Oh, there's questions everywhere. I didn't know who was watching. I haven't done this for so long. I used to go live, and I just couldn't come up with a consistent schedule for going live unless I was away. And if you're away, you're in a hotel room using the crappy art in the background. It just didn't have the same sort of feel. So I never ever really did it. And now my concentration is just trying to get this room up and running. Once the room's up and running and some of the critters are sequestered away, then I can work on the big tank, and then the big tank will be my background, and we'll do it a bit more consistently. As long as I'm not dead,
Yeah. Well, we change things.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure, my friends. I apologize again for taking so long. You've been asking for this for probably well over a year, and I'd be honored if you want to ever do it again. I'd be honored. It's just trying to find that work around the schedule.
Yeah, I totally understand that.
Maybe after your next trip, we'll tie up again and find out what you've been up to.
I don't have anything planned right now. Nothing like that. I don't know. There's everywhere I want to go. The one place in the world, if I had an opportunity to go anywhere right now, and I've been asked to go 3 times, is India. But I don't know, and it's no disrespect, I don't know if I could get off the plane to get out of that urban area and you're dealing with an area of the world. It's the most populous area of the world, and the sanitation's not a high thing. Like in the urban areas, I don't know if I could get out of it. And it's not really a safe area unless you're traveling with people that you know and respect from that area. But my challenge is I go anywhere I go, I got to think about not just the facets. Am I going for fish, or am I going for snakes, or what am I going for? And usually I can go to an area that has a bit of everything.
Fill every cup.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Thanks everyone for watching. I appreciate it.
No, thanks for coming on.
Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
When it comes out.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you,
Cheers.
everybody. Have a good one.
Bye.
Catch you later.